on sort of thought-provoking topics. So if anyone has got any questions, please interject and we can try to have a discussion on certain aspects. Now, the talk I'm going to be talking about, the first part of my presentation, is going to be based on a book I read, Science and Religion, when I was a teenager. And as you can imagine, in those days, getting books in English was quite a rare thing. There was a lot of material in Hindi and Gujarati, and this book was written by Muni Shri Chandrasekhar Vijayji. They've actually got a temple in Palidhana. If you have seen the circle dome temple like a samosa, they're in the base, and that is where Muni Shri Chandrasekharji has written. They wrote a set of 7 books in English. So it's quite appropriate for this set of lectures, and so we'll be discussing the first part of the lecture. As I said, it's based on this. Now, when we talk of, Jainism will come to later, but when we talk of science, most of our children study science in school. So what comes into mind? Science would encompass maths, physics, chemistry, and biology. So that essentially would be the domain of science. And if you ask the kids would say, if it moves, it's biology, if it stinks, it's chemistry, and if it doesn't work, it's physics. So essentially, that's how most kids would describe science. But if you think of it, where is the interaction between science and religion? So physics has to do with things with matter, molecules of matter, electricity, magnetism, light, communications. So anything to do with matter would be the domain of physics. Chemistry, again, is combination of matter, chemicals. So you've got the periodic table, you start combining different molecules, atoms, and trying to concoct some mixtures, and wide applications in medicine, sort of people do chemical engineering. So again, it's got wide implications. So where religion would actually have some kind of symbiosis with science would be in biology, because biology is not only our physical human body, but we are actually more than that, not only us, but all life forms. So whether it's plants, animals, and again, that's a unique distinction for Jains, because not many faiths believe in life in other life forms. So essentially, that's where the interaction between science and religion comes to play. If you now look at the scriptures, the Agams have not only described about soul, Atma and Atma and Atma, there have been also enough number of scriptures talking about matter, Budgal. So as you can see, that science, the religion has not only just confined itself to a narrow Samaisa, just talking about Atma, pure Atmachu, it's also described what is matter. And as we go along with our presentation, you will see that there is a very good sort of symbiosis between the two. Now, generally, the perception has been with science and religion that they are at odds with one another. So people will believe that, so scientists believe that, you talk about all these abstract notions, soul, karma, we can't see all these things. It's not the domain. So there's been that kind of general drift recently, or even in the past, that science and religion are at odds with one another. And even from religion's point of view, religious sort of gurus would denounce, everything scientific is sort of bad, it's not conducive for you. So essentially, there has always been that kind of rift. Now, if you look at science, science generally has been, what is science? I need data, I need to measure things, I need to detect things. So even if you have this remote control, I can't see any waves, infrared rays going there, but I can see the effect of what's happening with this remote control here. So even if I can't physically see things, I can see the effect of something which is physical. And you need data, you need to be able to measure things, you need to feel or observe things. Religion is to do more with morality and metaphysics. We've covered metaphysics in the past few lectures, and metaphysics is, I think when we did the Vanditu Sutra, we covered what metaphysics was. It is a reality, it is not a figment of imagination. It's a reality, but it's a reality which we cannot see. So for example, we talk of karma, the Jain universe. We believe that these are all real concepts, it's not a figment of imagination. And things, the domain where you cannot actually physically see things becomes metaphysics. So if we talk about Dev Devi, we talk about hell, Narak, we believe these are actual realities. We believe you can transmigrate into those kind of domains. But who's going to prove those things? No one can prove shaken in this day and age. So that becomes domain of metaphysics. a belief in actual things, but you cannot prove it. And I think the age-old concept for all scientists and religion is where am I? What's my purpose of life? And even if you look at the Srimad Rajchandra, he again starts with the same kind of concepts. What's the purpose of life? Why am I here? And if you look at Aristotle, Plato, and all these other Greek philosophers, same kind of questions. That who am I? Where have I come from? So essentially, the theme between both sects is actually it's very, very common. Now, obviously, with science, we have to use mind, logic. So it brings the question for religion: do we just need to have blind faith? That J.K. do you just follow it blindly? And in this Vaikalik Sutra, there is a very nice saying which is Sampikaye Appagga Mappa Enam. And the essence of that aphorism is that search truth for yourself. So no matter even if Bhagavan Mahavir, if the Agams or whatever scriptures have told you, whatever they have said to you, you use your rational reasoning mind and come up with the conclusion that is what they are saying is true or wrong. Anati pap thai, punya thai, karma che. Try using your reasoning mind and then come to your conclusions of any concepts which you might have. Even Bhagavan Mahavir advocated the same thing. Don't take what I'm saying as gospel truth. You search truth for yourself. So essentially, you can see that there's a lot of similarities between science and religion as we know it right now. And I think we're actually quite fortunate now. If you heard Vinod Bhai Kapasi talk of sort of in his previous lectures, until recently, the Jain Agams were in Bhandars. And it was only the domains of the Acharyas who would be reading those scriptures. So for us as lay people, we were bogged down in rituals. Do this, don't do this. And the real essence of the knowledge did not come out to the masses. When Vinod Bhai himself said when he wanted to do his PhD, he went to the Guru Maharajas. They said, no, you're a Shravak. How can you read the scriptures here? This is not the domain for you. It's only the past 20, 30 years whereby it's really opened up. There's been a lot of academic researchers dwelling into all the scriptures and then finding out what are the essence in our agams. So in a way, we're actually in a very golden period right now, because we have now got a lot of material is available in English. If you go to the Jain library, which is in Jaina, there were over 2,000-3,000 books, many in English, and then you can, as I said, search truth for yourself. Now, one of the main things, what is something very complex? Why is science or why is religion very difficult to follow? I mean, as you can see, sometimes people say religion is very easy to do, but the concept which makes both in science and in religion is this concept of duality. And this is what makes things kind of a bit complex. So what is duality? So for example, if there is light, if light was particles, it's very easy. You know, people can say, okay, light is a stream of particles, it has got mass, it has got motion, and we can do some physics, and we can now deduce some theories about particles. But light is not just only particles, it's also waves. And it's this dual nature of whether it's a particle or it's a wave which actually confuses or perplexes scientists. How can a certain thing have dual nature? So that's one of the great mysteries of science. They have to cope with both. Like sometimes when you want to devise certain instruments, you have to take light as particles, and that's all the physics and dynamics is based on particles. And other times it's a wave. There's actually going to be an amplitude of light, there's going to be the frequency of light, and all this makes, so light has got a dual nature. And exactly opposite of each other. So if all the physics which is to do with waves is not applicable to light as particles, and whatever equations you come up for light as particles are not applicable to waves. Two totally different concepts, but in one. Light is one entity, but two totally dual nature for light. Again, Aristotle, Plato, Descartes, all these kind of people in the past, Greek philosophers, have coped with mind and matter. What is mind and matter? There is a duality there. Mind and body. My body does not sometimes behave what my mind says. Sometimes my mind does the opposite of my body says. There's always a kind of dual concept. Brain is something physical, mind is something non-physical. So what is mind? There's always a kind of dual nature. Again, there's another duality which is known as the subject and the the object. So for example, if I say this is a table here, so I can see it's a reality, it's not a figment of imagination. But if I close my eyes, then I can say I can't see any table. So does this mean that the table is only existing because I can see it? If I close my eyes and I can't see table, then this reality is not existing. So in the past, people sometimes used to come up with certain concepts saying, whatever is reality is something which I can see. If I close my eyes, if I can't see it, it's just not there. And then there's been a lot of debates on that concept, and people say that cannot be true. If I'm put away from here, if I go home, this table is still going to exist. So a lot of the Jain thinkers have disputed that kind of theory, that you cannot say. So for example, a lot of the Hindus say Brahma is the only reality, Brahma. Everything else is Maya, illusion. Brahma is the only thing which is constant in life. Everything else changes. So therefore the Hindus have got this vast concept of Brahma being the only ultimate reality. Everything else is illusion, Maya, something which is non-real. As a table chair, maybe after 2-3 years, this table is going to disintegrate, it's going to disappear. But Brahma is only reality. Everything else is going to change. But what Jain says is we do believe in that, but we cannot deny the reality. Athena, this is a podium, and it is a podium. When it disintegrates in the future, it's fine. So it's a duality, Jainism combines into one. Even let's look at politics, legislative and executive. You've got the Prime Minister and you've got the President. The President of India has got very little powers. Two sort of heads of state, but again sort of a duality. That someone has got power, another person doesn't have power. Queen is just a figurehead. I mean, another sort of Prime Minister is the one who is actually leading it. So again, it's kind of a duality here. If you look at the Chinese, yin yang, male and female, light and darkness. Now it's very interesting to think about this concept here. When you talk of male or female, light or darkness, we are not talking of two separate entities. Can you actually have lightness and darkness at the same time? In this very instant. Can you have male and female at the same time? Can you have motion and stillness at the same time? So for example, here I am, I'm sleeping. I'm totally still, but yet there is motion within me, my heart is beating. So you actually have two opposite concepts, but in reality, they're existing at the same time. So if someone asks you, are you still? Or if someone observes you, says, I'm absolutely still. But yet, if you go deeper into it, there's actually motion. Your heart is beating. Life and death. Am I alive or am I dead? Well, because I'm speaking, I am alive. But at the same time, there are dead cells within my body. There are a lot of, they always, so within part of me, there are dead hair, dead. So I am a combination of both life and death. Active and passive. So the same object can actually have mutually exclusive entities. And that's where the confusion comes along. The two opposite criteria, light is on or off. Well, it could be on or off, or it's either on or off, but can it be on or off at the same time? So again, if you look at Buddhist, the main essence of Buddhist philosophy is everything is in a state of flux and changing. What they say is, you observe all around that if I look at myself, I was a young boy, now I'm this, and I'm going to grow old. So I'm not constant, I'm changing. You look at the weather, look at day and night. So Buddhists are very strong advocates of everything is in a state of flux and changing. There is nothing constant, nothing is still, matter or life. So that's the essence of the Buddhists. Whereas the Hindu, as I alluded before, that Brahma is the only reality. Everything else is illusionary. It's it might be there, it might go away. So they always believe in this Brahma as a concept. And what do Jains do? They combine the duality into one. So what is the duality in Jain? Jeev and Ajeev. It's a duality. I am both a Jeev and a Jeev. The Jeev is the consciousness within me, my soul, and I've still got my body, which is a Jeev. So me as an entity, one object, I'm a combination of two mutually exclusive entities. Jeev and Ajeev are totally opposite. Jeev has got consciousness, Ajeev does not have consciousness. So two exactly opposite. So all the properties of soul are not existing in matter, and all the properties of matter are not existing in Jeev. So two exactly opposite entities, but combined in one. Even if you look at the concept of karma, bhav karma and dravya karma. What Jains say, dravya karma means Jains are one of the few, in fact, one of the only religion which says karma is actually a particle of matter. It's matter, and the soul with its actions attracts the particles of matter. You cannot see that the particles of matter. But it is actually matter. So that actually is dravya. Dravya means object. But bhav is something to do with the soul, which you cannot see. So for example, it's like a chicken and egg solution. My soul I'm getting angry, I'm getting jealous. These are distortions of my soul. That's the bhav I'm getting. And because of that bhav, I'm attracting the physical particles. આપણે દેરાસરમાં જાય તો ઘણી માણસો કે આપણે ચાલો ફૂલ પૂજા કરે, લેટ્સ ડુ આપણે ધૂપ પૂજા કરી. That's all dravya, objects. And then at the same time, after we have done the dravya, then we do the bhav. આપણે ચેતીમદન કર્યું. You are now praying કે હે ભગવાન મને તમારા બધા qualities જોઈએ છે. So can you see that even when we go to the temple, it's a combination of dravya and bhav. Dravya means all the rituals we are doing here. It's all to do with objects. Pani thi apne bhagwan ne navadaiva, we have done the dhuk puja, we have done the arti, we've sort of bhagwan ne phul chadaiva. That's all dravya puja. But then on the other hand, it becomes a bhav puja. That's again a duality. So this is what makes difficulty in science and in religion both. We generally are attuned to only one concept, one. What we see is physical. So that's why, and in science also that's been the complex part. So when Newton actually had his law of gravitation, Einstein came along and refuted that law of gravitation and said, no, there's a theory of relativity. So it is because of this duality, because what Newton did with the law of gravitation worked for things which did not have a huge mass. But when you had huge planets, and when you had Mercury and Saturn, and these huge objects had huge gravitational forces, the theory of Newton's actually broke down. And therefore you had to have Einstein come along and then have this theory of relativity. So again, as you can see, science was contained in a certain domain. It is not all encompassing. Now, let's look at science. Science has been there for ever since. So for example, you have the Stone Age, you have the Ice Age. So when you had people rubbing two stones together and they would have created fire. Those are scientists. So they have now said that for survival, we need to cook food, we need fire. Let's rub two stones. Someone must have experimented or deduced it and come up with this, that now we can create fire. They started creating tools that are for agriculture. It has evolved, but let's look at science as we know it now over the past 500 years, which is with the advent of electricity, and that's what we know as science in terms of practical, with the advent. So the really defining point is the discovery of electricity, and since then the scientific development has been very rapid. We know that science, as we know now, it's concerned with the manifestations of matter. That's all what science is right now focused on. And if it's going beyond that, do we believe in reincarnation? Scientists look into that, life after death, hypnosis. They've not really come to any kind of firm conclusions. So right now, science is really focused on matter. But with knowledge came arrogance and impudence. Scientists, when you make a small discovery, you think that this is it. I have now eureka. I have now discovered such a great concept that this is now set in stone. And how many times have scientists said that I've actually discovered something, but a few years later, that same theory has actually been overturned the other way around. And scientists have scoffed at scriptural revelations and myths and figments of imagination. So that's been, and not only Jainism, even if you look at the Bible, there have been a lot of sort of friction between the scientists and the people that make the papers in Vatican. So that's always been a very strong bipolar attitude between science and religion. Now, from my perspective, science obviously has got pluses and minuses. Science has done great things, so one cannot deny the fact that science is useless. Science has had great benefits to us as society. It's alleviated human misery, human progress and development. But at the same time, science has been very instrumental for terrible violence and misery. So let's look at one concept of science, nuclear physics. So someone then decided that the small electrons and, if you have an atom has got protons, neutrons and electrons. If you now compress this thing, there's a huge amount of energy within this small structure. And with this discovery of kind of nuclear physics came up nuclear power stations. There's so many nuclear power stations that's generating electricity around the world. But the same theory then made the atomic bomb. So as you can see, that the same concept of nuclear physics has had two exactly opposite effects. One of extreme violence and other one of assisting humanity. My contention is that whereas science actually has pluses and minuses, religion does not have any minuses. So for example, if you were young, or if there was a young kid and he's reciting sutras, he does not understand any single word of those sutras, but it's still going to have a beneficial effect on him. There cannot be any harm from him reciting the sutras. He's just parroting, just parroting all the scriptures, but yet there is a beneficial effect on him. He's either going to be calm. So religion, no matter at what level you are in terms of your spiritual development, it always has got a beneficial effect. Religion and spirituality can never ever have an adverse effect. Never. Yes, people can do wrong things in the name of religion. That's separate. That's what humans can do to distort religion. In the name of religion, in the name of Allah, I'm going to be having violence. But that's not what the religion proclaims. That's what people are doing. Even if you look at, let's not even look at Muslims. Let's even look at Jains themselves. If you look at Samaj Shikhar, there have been Swetamas and Digambas fighting over the rights of who has got rights to the Bhanda, and it's actually even sometimes been violent aggression between the two communities. So these are people who can then distort the image of a faith, but religion can never ever sort of give you the concept of saying no to fight for your rights. So that's one difference between science and religion from my point of view. In religion, it's a win-win situation, no matter at what level you are. Whereas in science, it's kind of a win-lose situation. Before I move along, Chirag, you're laughing?
I think it's a bit unfair to say that religion is win-win and science is win-lose. Because it's not science that necessarily creates it's there, and it's man that decides to make it all.
Okay.
So, and the other thing, science has the grace to say that it's not perfect and it evolves. Whereas religion, there's a set of rules and there's no evolution.
So with religion,
for example, the shape of the universe.
Yeah.
50 years ago we thought we lived in a big universe. We had a galaxy. Now we know we live in billions of galaxies. And 10 years time, goodness knows what else we'll know. Right now, there's so much stuff that's happening in subatomic particles.
Right.
So, there's so much stuff that's actually moving on. And that's progression, isn't it? Whereas religion tends to be quite steady.
I think you have to separate out religion from the point of view that if you look at the scriptures talk of general concepts. And generally scriptures have never talked about rituals. So if you're talking of religion in terms of rituals, then obviously those are distorted. It depends on, for example, pratikaman karta hoy, ladies hai bola hai, ladies hai na bola hai. Which scripture would say something over in historical past, something could have happened and saying generally scriptures have the Agams, to the best of my knowledge, have never gone into those kind of details. So when you talk of and the reason why people talk in very high regard of religion is that the revelations in the scriptures are eternal. So whatever they say cannot change in the past, present or future. So whereas science, as you rightly say, is going to be evolving. So now we know it's super galaxies and then it's going to evolve further. So science will always come, they're always trying to find out this universal law, and no one is ever able to find out what is this one law which governs everything. Whereas, so that's a big difference between, so you have to separate out religion from these rituals, what I and you do, and talk about the theory of karma, the Nav Tattva, the 6 Astikayas. So these are the kind of concepts which cover are timeless concepts, and they would be applicable no matter whether it's the 5th ara, the 6th ara, or which ara. These are always applicable across all time, and I think that's a big difference between the science and religion. And I think it's not fair to sort of disregard science or science to disregard religion. They both have their own space, and I think if you look at if you go to Google and the internet, a lot of the research now is trying to say, can we combine the two together? So for example, if I'm doing meditation and I'm talking about chakras, okay, I can activate my chakras. That's a very spiritual concept. Now you actually have people who have got medical knowledge and saying that this concept of chakras actually coincides with endocrine glands. Okay, when they say that I've got my chakra here and my chakra here, that there's a pituitary gland here, there's all these different glands here. So there's research going on saying that you have got science here and you've got religion here. Are they meeting together? And many things. I mean, as I go along my presentation, someone has actually done a research on genetics and karma. A whole 300-page thesis on genetics and karma. So people are now saying that, let's not sort of say that, no, what Jane says is the right thing and you scientists are all sort of humbug. It's like, yes, there are certain areas we might differ with one another, but in many areas we could be complementary with one another. So, obviously, science, as I said, the pros and cons of science, a lot of benefits, medical, physical, communications, infrastructure, industrial, and I think that one of the greatest things and why religion has lagged behind in terms of the development is that scientists are flexible to change when it needs to change. That's one of the greatest things with scientists. They do not have sort of closed ideas. If someone comes and says, your theory is wrong, scientists will actually agree with you, and I think I need to now change my ideas and my notions. Whereas people with kind of religious ideas have been very fixated. Now, and if it could be a wrong idea, then that's why religion has perhaps not progressed as much as it should have. The flip side of science is exploitive. Look at all the kind of, I mean, whilst we are still reaping the benefits of medical science, what are they doing? Testing on animals. So again, it's a very debatable point that if we do not for that, we will not be getting the medicines. But again, at the same time, it is exploitive. You are exploiting the animals, so it's exploitive. Acquisitive, I want more. You know, Apple, iPhone 5, 6 goes on, so I just need more and more. People are not just, if I've got iPhone 5, why aren't you not just satisfied with 5? Why do I need to go 6, 7 and go on? I just want more and more. Destructive, it can lead to kind of destructive. So that's kind of the flip side of science. Now, impressed with the rapid strides in science and technology, the mind of modern man has got molded to accept all things by logic and scientific standards. Now, I think this, in my view, is a big problem for the kids. When you talk to the kids in the class, their only discussions is to do with logic and scientific standards. Does it make sense? And yes, 80-90% we need to explain to them, but there's obviously going to be that 10, 20, 30% which is a grey area, because the domain of religion has got many other things like karma, soul. How can I see it? I cannot prove it. So there is, and it's through a lot of personal sort of contemplation that you come to that truth. The way I look at it is as such. I mean, when I was reading these kind of books, if I went to a doctor and doctor says that your one drop of blood has got 5 million red blood cells. Now, that's very difficult to believe that how can such a small drop of blood have so much red blood cells. But then you believe them because they've got the microscope, they've done the tests, and you believe them. So if a doctor convinces me with that, then I have got faith in all what he says. So if he tells me about my lung, if he tells me about my bones, because now you've got that full faith that I've got the full trust that these people have done their research, and I've got full faith in all what they say. Similarly with religion. If my scriptures have told me about this thing, a few things, and I believe in this, I'm now ready and prepared to believe in all what it says about the scriptures. So that's kind of the angle which you can go along with. Many things are going to be very difficult to believe, because if you look at Kalpa Sutra, you know what, is this like almost like Greek mythology? But then it's your leap of faith that you have to then believe that did this thing. Where is Meru? You know, how could a baby have taken him to Meru Parvat? So certain things you have to then have the leap of faith and say that. So logic and science has to then stop at a certain point, and then goes your kind of faith and belief. Unfortunately, the way science is moving right now, we feel that it's going towards an ill-fated doom of destructions. I mean, look at Sainsbury's and all these places. People are taken away and all these machines just along. Look at 20, 30 years down the line. Doesn't it make you wonder, what are we going to do? If all machines are going to be doing everything, you go to Barclays Bank, NatWest Bank, they know people, they're cashiers. Everything is being done now by machines. Machines are there are only 2 people now just doing for any complex things. But people are being phased out. It's going to be time for just machines controlling everything. Garma Hoover, now robots are coming to do your Hoover. So there is now no labor. What are people going to be doing 30, 40, 50 years down the line? Essentially, it gives you the question, and eventually the mind of man is how are we going to use our mind for? As you can see, when we were young, we could actually remember telephone numbers and all that. Our mind is very active. Now with this context list, you can't even remember your own wife's or your children's phone numbers. You have to now have to, if that battery is down, you actually can't call your children. So essentially, the mind is going down. I mean, you could see like our parents or grandparents, they could do these complex calculations, 47 times 53, they'll just do it like this. Whereas we are now, so science is actually decapitating us. Deforestation, climate change. If you just read the BBC article today, Delhi is considered to be the most polluted city in the world right now. One of the news reporters said that I'm not going to be staying in Delhi because it's having adverse effect on my health, and he's moving away. Climate change, haves and have-nots, big problem. People are having, this is a big problem being discussed amongst all this G20, that people are having, why is this lot of unrest in the world? A lot of people are saying, a lot of people have got lots of things, other people are running lots of immigrants, the migrants' boats. It's all to do with haves and have-nots, and exploration of natural resources. All this to do with science, just going on a sort of destructive path.
That's just science. I think that's just people being greedy.
I mean, I think it leads to the next stage of growth. If you now look at any stock share price, the main key thing is that for any company, they need to have growth. So if you were to buy any, say, Apple's share price or anything, so the concept of science and development is, okay, with science, growth is very good. I mean, I'll come into, in fact, this is a slide of Moore's law. What Moore's law said is, Moore was actually working in Intel, and he said that if you have 1 square inch, the number of transistors which you can put on 1 square inch is doubling every year. So this, he did it in 1970s or 80s, and he has been proved right, that before in 1 square inch, you could have put 20,000 transistors. Now you could have, I mean, if you look at that, it's got an exponential growth. So today, you could be having 2 billion transistors in 1 square inch. So that is growth. It is growing very, but this growth is then leading to sort of unsustainable. You cannot sustain that level of growth for it, because that's what depleting the natural resources. So whilst there is some advantage, there is also that you cannot just have that infinite growth going forward or along. Science has got its, there's not balance. You just can't grow, and in that pursuit of growth, you are actually harming yourself.
Science is just curiosity and learning, and and that's never going to stop. People are curious, and they want to know, what they can build or discover, or make, or be creative. That's what science is. This is commerce and commercial. This is something else.
In a way, true, but if you see, for example, commerce means, for example, there is a company, say Intel, which is actually, which is just purely dedicated to science, creating transistors. So, whilst, if you isolate the commerce from science, then in itself it's fine, that there is no harm, because they are now inventing new things, that they do microelectronic engineering. So that was what I did in my master's, that microelectronic engineering, so in a silicon chip, or in, how can you put so many transistors in this? So the science is moving at a very rapid state. So that is fine, it's having a lot of benefits, but again it's intertwined with, as you say, with commerce, because that's what humans are doing. That if you created something out of no utility, then what's the point of it? That science has to have some utility. And it's that utility which is being exploited to a very high level, which is creating that. Sorry, Chef. Yeah.
I'm going to disagree with you as well here, because more practicing therapy, because I think it's what people are doing with science. Intel, at the end of the day, is a company to make money.
Right.
Okay. We have a lot of non-profit organizations who use science in the name of good and are trying to improve people's lives. And their idea is not to make money, they're actually trying to improve people. You can argue it the same way. What people are doing in the name of religion, the greatest threat at the moment is ISIS. What is happening as well? Okay, so I think to say that science in a way is causing all the problems, it's what people are doing with it, but people do the same with religion. And science at the same time is trying to solve a lot of problems. We've got a lot of food sources which are now coming out. We're looking at different ways to create energy. So I think it's a little bit, maybe we need to say it's what people are doing in the name of science, but you can argue the same with religion. And with religion, I mean, I'm not really aware, but I'm sure you can correct me here, okay? I don't know within our Jain religion, for instance, is anyone investigating? Is anyone saying, actually, this is the shape of the universe? Actually, is anyone starting to think about things? Because I just don't know.
Okay. I tend to agree with you. I mean, obviously, I'm not here to sort of say, because obviously I'm part of the society and reaping all the benefits of what science is doing. But I think the point which I was trying to convey here is that this concept of what is not. Let me just walk through this. So, for example, if you look at a finance example, is like if you have £100 and you're getting a 5% interest on it. So in 1 year, you're going to get £105. Now, if you actually compound it semi-annually, so someone's going to give you interest every 6 months. So what's going to happen is that for £100, in 6 months it's going to become £2.5, so 102.5, and then you're going to get 5% on 102.5. So in that case, you've got 105.06. So that's become more. And if you do that quarterly, so it's going to become even more, quarterly compounding, 105.09. Now, there is something which is known as instantaneous, not even daily. Someone can do daily compounding, but someone can say, can I grow my money every millisecond, every instant, every microsecond? And if I wanted to grow my money at 5% every millisecond, what's the formula? How much will I get? And that's the formula. The total is equal to amount E exponential to the RT, ERT. So exponential is a very scientific term. It's been used almost everywhere, exponential. So if I compound my money at not even daily, but every millisecond, then that's what my is. So A is £100. On your scientific calculator, you can put EXP, and then to the power of rate is 5%, and T time is 1 year. If you put that formula in, you're going to grow your money. Your money is going to become 105.13 cents. So what you've now done is you have grown your money at an exponential rate. As you can see that this curve is going, and if you have a linear curve will come here. But an exponential curve, it goes to infinity. It doesn't stop. It just grows, and it never ever touches here. So you can have a curve which is a straight line curve. You can have a curve which is to the power of x squared, which will again meet something. So, but an exponential curve will never ever meet. It grows at a huge rate. And this is the problem which I'm saying, that when growth becomes exponential or very huge, that actually causes the problem. And there's no problem I mean, exponential growth is actually good, because if I compare that to religion, as you would say, where do we see growth? The whole concept of Gunastan is to do with growth. That's exactly what Gunastan means, that I'm at the 4th level of my spiritual development. I then progress to 5th, 6th, and eventually what religion says is if I get to the 14th level of the Gunastan, I've reached moksha. But in between you can fall, you can rise up. So essentially in both states, with growth, falling down is very much possible. So whilst I'm not denying the fact, but I'm just trying to draw out that the problem which science and, as you probably can say, commerce, both put together, is this problem of growth, in my view, which is causing the problems which I think, which is leading to that kind of doom scenario that when people are that huge growth, rapid growth.
I think to come back to that debate about science and all that, I mean that makes the common ground that humans, in both religion and science, that's the common humans. Science is probably a tool which is being used by humans. Then the same thing, human mind is the way they're using science like that. So science in itself is not wrong. What humans are doing with that science as a tool is, like, obviously they're using it in the way they should not be using. Same way that humans use the mind in the right way, and if you apply that to religion, make it as a common thing. The humans are the common thing between science and the religion.
I think that has to be true, because if you look at the example of nuclear physics, that science in itself cannot be wrong, because that nuclear physics, you can create nuclear power stations, but that same equations, the same concepts, you use that to create a nuclear bomb. So if you actually have, so science per se is matter. Science is matter. So when you read physics books, if you look at all these equations, science in its as a standalone entity, it's fine. There's no harm with science. But obviously, it's when the human interacts with science that is the problem. And it's obviously this human interaction with this growth, and I'll bring a few quotes from eminent scientists who actually even suggest the same thing, that pure science is fine, but it's the corrupt humans. So for example, if I was in the research and development team, I might come up with what's good for me. I need more funding to come from me. So I'm actually going to distort certain things. Even if it's not working, I just want to secure my career. I want to secure that I get some more research and funding. So people then now start having some devious minds. So Science in itself cannot be wrong, it is good, but I think it's what people do with it, and people can always be good and bad, and that's and same thing with religion. So even as you can see in that diagram there is a Sadhu Maharaj who is at a very high level of spiritual progress, but he's also falling down. So it's not only that he outwardly he could be appearing to be like a very pious, great, even Acharya, but they can also fall down. So I think it's what humans do out of it. So one cannot say that religion is bad thing. Look at it, he fell down. So obviously you can't point the finger to the religion, what a bad religion. But well, he is one who did not follow it properly and he fell down. So I think that's kind of the similarity, that you cannot deny that science is bad or religion is bad. They are good, but it's what people do with them. Recently, you might have seen in news that, this is again very simplistic. Obviously, here I am biased towards religion, so obviously many of my quotations are going to be towards religion and then science, although I'm from a scientific background. Religion teaches simple living and high thinking. That's a kind of a very old anecdote. And science teaches high living and selfish thinking. Now, obviously, people will argue that science does not teach that. Science does not teach it, but it's a kind of a loose phrase. So recently, as you can see, on 31st of May, Bhanwarlal Doshi, who is worth $600 million, and this is not something out of any. If you read the Economic Times, the Telegraph, the articles are all around. He was a plastics king in Delhi, worth listed by Forbes of $600 million, who gave up and became a sadhu just a few days ago. So he's now become a sadhu. And one makes you wonder that with all this wealth here, $600 million, not 6 million, not 60 million, $600 million wealth. And he gave it all up to live a life of a sadhu. And in this day and age, just 31st of May, just less than a week ago. And here you have two brothers, billionaires, yet fighting over the same thing. So it's kind of thing that what I'm trying to portray across is that this person, Mr. Bhanwarlal Doshi, he must have grown his business. After a certain stage, if you look at Bill Gates, if you look at Warren Buffett, what are they doing now? In fact, just yesterday in BBC, they were saying that Mr. I forget his name, for the first person in education, Mr. Varkey or someone, he's donated his wealth to the Bill Gates Foundation. So people have grown, become billionaires, and after they reach that level, it says, well, you know what, I can't now become a trillionaire, otherwise I'll start buying USA and I'll start buying countries. So at a certain level, they are now saying that now we need to do some worthy causes. So then becomes a point whereby science or materialism or whatever you call it reaches a plateau, and then this becomes a vacuum. What next? And as you can see, that this vacuum was by that there is some spiritual, there's something more beyond this, beyond the wealth, beyond everything. So, as a broad statement, as it might be again, as I said, Tirthankars are incarnations of truth. Scientists are explorers of truth. Whatever truths which scientists portray might be overturned as time goes along. Whereas whatever Tirthankars have espoused is kind of the eternal truth. And I think that's kind of the fundamental sort of idea that you are here to sort of get you convinced that there's a lot of merit, and we are so fortunate that there's so much material available for us to realize this truth, what the Tirthankars have espoused to us. Religion teaches to kill enmity, science encourages to kill enemies. Obviously, you might dispute, science does not say that. It's a humans with distorted minds which encourages to kill enemies. Science is just a tool which enables you to kill enemies, but it's a kind of a general. Humans have reached space, but space within is hollow. People have depression. People have all these things. So you've gone across a huge amount of space. You've now went to the moon. Now you want to go to Mars. You want to start colonizing these planets across huge lengths, but space within is hollow. And that's where the vacuum, where religion sort of fills in. And so that was the kind of the idea that science can take you as far as you want, but eventually there is that role and domain of religion has got a huge part in our lives. Upanishads. Now, looking at science and again, this is from Wikipedia. If I just read in Hinduism and in particular Gnana Yoga, there is a concept of neti in Upanishads. And what does neti mean? It is not this, it is not that. So to search for God, what they use is actually negation. What is God? Is God water? No, it's not water. Is God fire? No, because if I pray to God as fire, Agni is fire, but then fire can also destroy. If I jump into fire, it will kill me. So no. Fire cannot be God. Is God air? Vayu? Because in Hindu mythology, there's been a lot of concepts of giving a lot of respect to the elements of nature. And sometimes to the extent of they're almost like God-like, these elements, earth, fire, air. And it's like, could it be air? Could air be God? And says, no, you can actually have whirlpools which will actually kill. So the concept of Upanishads, neti means, can you discover God not through positive things, but by it's not book, it's not this, it's not chair, God is not this, it's not this. And that's a whole concept of saying anati to suche. And let me search God through all these things, that it's not this, it's not this. I'm not God because I've got Rag, Dvesh, Krodh. So who is God? Where is God? So they've got a very strong concept of neti. Science has got a similar concept of trial and error method. Should it be this? No. There's some error here. It should be that. If you look at in finance, there is actually even in Excel, there is a goal seek. That I want to get to this goal here, and then how can I get to that goal? Is I'm going to put some variables here, and through trial and error, I'm going to get to this solution here. So even science believes in. So for example, Edison, when someone asks him, I think everyone knows that Edison is the one who created the light bulb. He failed many times before he created the light bulb. And what did he say? That I have not failed, I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. So again, through lots of things, he tried this, it did not work. He tried this, it did not work. So through lots of this negation, so as you can see that if you open up your mind, scriptures and science or religion and philosophies are sometimes are quite common. That whatever concepts have been put into Upanishads are quite sort of relevant. Obviously, Upanishads do not talk about can I discover the light bulb, but the concepts are very, very similar.
You can flip that round, instead of saying neti, you could say that God is omnipresent and omnipotent, so it's everything. God is everywhere and is everything. And then saying with science, it's not that they failed, they've got lots of possibilities, the possibilities are endless.
That's a very debatable point. So if you say God is omnipresent and omnipotent, then again is a very, as you can see, it's a dual. We have to now look at it from a dual point of view. If you say that, I would agree and disagree with you. When I believe by God, I say God is only in Sichila, according to the Jain point of view. That's what I actually believe in God. But if looking at your statement that God is omnipresent, God is everywhere, I then also, if you look at the dual nature, that you've got a soul, and I've got a soul, the plants have got a soul, and that soul has got the potential to become the pure. So basically, essentially, there is Godhead in everyone. So in one way, you can dispute the fact that no, we are not all gods. God is not everywhere. God is not here. God is not in the plants. But in another way, it is there. So it's a debatable point. Like a lot of the other philosophies believe that God is omnipresent, God is everywhere. And that's one of the reasons. So when you say namaste, that whole concept of namaste, what does namaste mean? Nama aste. I am bowing down to the divinity within you. Aste means the soul. So from that point of view, yes, that's what namaste means. That every one of us has got soul. God is omnipresent. Even a drop of water has got life, and it's got the potential to become to Sichila. So you have to have the distinction. You cannot start believing, okay, I'm God, this is God, God is omnipresent, because God is not omnipresent here. You cannot say this has got no life. So omnipresent means everywhere. So God is not present in something which is Rajeev. So from that point of view, you cannot say that God is omnipresent. There is Jeev and there is Rajeev. A Jeev can never have consciousness, and that can never be God. It's matter. Yeah, okay, yeah. So that's fine. So you were trying to say that you can use this concept,
So what I'm saying is that it's not, here this example is an example of trial and error, or almost a negative example of what it isn't. What I'm saying is that, instead you think of it in a different way and say it is everything, and say the science is possibility, it's endless possibility.
Yeah. I think that's true, because if you look at it from a Jain point of view, they say that don't think of things as negative, so don't have negative thoughts. So So rather than saying, nahi karo, maybe you could do it better. So in that point of view, it's quite right. Don't use negative notions. And there are a lot of books or even concepts saying power of positive thinking, that start thinking positively. So in that point of view, you can say that there's life everywhere. So, and this is what Jains have actually espoused. There's life everywhere. So from that point of view, it is right, yeah. That you have to think that it's not like it's not this, it's not this. It is somewhere. And I think we, especially from a Jain point of view, we should be fortunate enough to say that the curiosity, what's there, has been written down in the scriptures. So whatever curiosity there is, that what is the universe, what is this, it's there. So so we're quite fortunate to understand that. Now, one thing which I wanted to bring out here is that obviously, whilst we have the total faith in our scriptures, scientists, some of the theories have kept on evolving. So let's look at meteors. 500-600 years ago, people are walking along the streets and they said that I see stones falling from the sky. People said, so are you mad? That how can you see stones falling from the sky? Then someone would say, you know what, this is absolute rubbish. If I throw a stone up, that stone will fall down. Yes, that I can see. But how can the stone start falling from the sky? And so for many years, people who actually observed these meteors falling down, which we now know as meteors, were considered as lunatics. These people are just mad people. And they were clever people who were saying that, you know what, it's not observable. I cannot observe. I cannot test a theory. If I throw a stone up, I can see it falling down. But how can you just say that something is falling from the sky? Who threw it up for it to fall down? So that theory does not stand to reason, and therefore you are a mad person. If you say that stones are falling from the sky, that is just total lunatic. And that happened so many years ago. And these are scientists. And they observe, they think, and saying this, what observation you're doing is totally at odds. Eventually, until that time, where I think there was a French person who actually observed, saying that look, actually has fallen down, and then came the advent of telescopes, and people started looking at all the moons, and then they said, yes, it is possible that actually you can have some meteors and you can have craters being forming from there. So that whole concept over 400-500 years then changed. In Jain scriptures, we've got the theories of tulkas, tejas body. And it's been written there that these are like heat, these are objects with a lot of heat. Tejas means heat, which can then sort of are within these skies and then they can fall across. So these ulkas could be construed as meteors. Theory of gravitation espoused by Newton versus Einstein's theory of relativity, which I mentioned before. So obviously Newton came up with this theory of gravitation, and that theory broke down with velocities approaching the speed of light. Now, so Newton came there, then people started discovering the electron. Now electron moves very fast, almost approaching towards the speed of light. So whatever theories which Newton had got, F is equal to ma, and all this, the equations for which Newton had come up, they all broke down for electrons because they were moving at the speed of light. So that theory actually broke down. It also broke down for huge objects. So this theory, and then it was actually replaced by the theory of relativity by Einstein. So you can imagine that there's a very eminent scientist, his theory was not gospel truth. It actually was replaced. So obviously, as we know that Newton discovered this gravitation through an apple falling from the sky, and here we have Einstein who came up with this famous equation, E is equal to mc squared. It can be actually said that he actually was a spiritualist, Einstein. Energy, there's some energy here. E is energy, which is something which you cannot see. I cannot see energy. E is equal to m is mass. Mass has to do with particles. And c squared, c is actually the speed of light. So if you actually take the speed of light, you square it. Square means 5 times 5 is 25, 3 times 3 is 9. You square the speed of light, you multiply it by mass, you will come up with energy. Energy is equal to mc squared. So mass can actually be transferred into energy, and energy can be sort of transferred into mass. So he had that. Are we done? Okay. So here is Einstein, who actually then came up with this kind of a unique theory of sort of energy, things which you cannot see. There's energy in terms of gravitational field. There's a magnetic force. These are all energies here. And with these energies, and he came up with this famous equation, E is equal to mc squared. So on this note, we'll leave it and then we can discuss some other concepts in the next week. If there's any questions, we can take on. We've got, I think, 3-4 minutes. Otherwise, we can carry on next week. Yep.
Not a question, it's just a comment that actually we James are quite fortunate that we can work with and not be opposed to science, because our philosophy is not against science, whereas you take the Christian religion, they say that God made the world in 7 days, and how do you rationalize that when you have an evolutionary theory? So at least in our religion we don't have that competing or antagonistic view.
I think you're quite right. In fact, what you say is actually quite right, because in a way I was fortunate enough just 3 days ago I was in the Vatican and look at the Sistine Chapel and in all the spaces, you could see that Michelangelo has actually depicted all the kind of the creation of Earth in 7 days, so you can see all those there. And it just makes you wonder that these are great artists, but obviously looking at it from the Christian point of view, that God created the world in this many days here, and He's created that heaven and hell concept and everything. But I think you're quite right that we are quite fortunate to have that benefit of doubt, that very scientific explanations of, because when you look at other faiths, it says, does it really make sense? Whereas for us, there's that benefit that when you have that full faith in the scriptures, then many of your curiosities gets answered, and you say, yeah, that's very logical and it's very scientific.
Talk about the marriage of science and change. What about some of the older scriptures, the things that talk about the science, how long the Third used to live, how tall they were? That goes against science, doesn't it? And when they were around.
Why would it go against science?
Because of how long ago they were around. I mean, we're talking about science and the fact that Christians believe that the Earth didn't exist 30,000 years before 30,000 years, and we're saying that goes against the scientific proof that we have today.
Right.
Yet we're happy to believe a lot of these other things which sound quite mythical.
Right. But again, as I said, it can be very. It is dichotomy, but in the sense that, for example, when you look at the Big Bang Theory and all that, it's like a certain point in time. But what about before that? And when you look at our scriptures, you're talking about time periods which are way beyond. You're talking about Rushabdev's height being sort of probably at the height of a mountain. And so, why would you want to disbelieve these things? If it's written in our scriptures saying that science has not disproved it, science has not proved it either, because,
I want to believe everything. I want to believe everything, but I don't want to say that I'm going on the road of discovery, so I don't want to say no to this or no to these. I'm open to everything. I think what I'm trying to say is that if we think this is possible, then that's got to be equally possible. We have to have an open mind.
But I think you're quite right. If you look at the example, just from my recent experience going to the Vatican, so for example, they actually believed that the Earth was stationary and everything was revolving around the sun. So there were actually artists who actually in the Vatican itself painted pictures and everything to convince the Pope that whatever you're believing is actually wrong, and it's the other way around. They actually believed in, I think, 6 days. And someone was then actually drawing, you could go along there and see all these different charts. They've drawn all these different geographical pictures there to convince the Pope that it's not 6 days, the day is actually on 7 days. So as you can see that people, probably they were written in the scriptures, and there were the scientists there trying to say that, you know what, your religious beliefs are actually wrong, it should be the other way around. And they were persecuted, many of them actually persecuted for their beliefs. If you then say that no, the earth is actually revolving around the sun, so what nonsense, you're actually going against the scriptures. And you should be persecuted for it.
In a couple of these slides you mentioned about science and truth. That's the only place where I kind of slightly disagree with you, because I think science pursues facts. Truth is a very different concept, because truth can't be altered. But what science does is, as the facts, as you learn, as you gain more knowledge, the facts alter, and we run out.
But that fact has to be true. So if I did an experiment, that fact has to be. I cannot alter the truth of it. I can't change it. So that fact has to be truth in this space of time.
Yeah.
In this space of time. And all religion says is this the ultimate truth, or is it just a relative truth? It's a truth given the space, time, and location. Apne religion mein kya dravya, kshetra, kal, and bhav. So that truth is limited to this period, to this time period. Whereas what religion is trying to say is, can I look at absolute truth? What is absolute truth?
Small question.
Yeah.
This concept of heaven and hell. I mean, people have described, but nobody sort of goes there and comes back and says how it is, and we sort of have a faith in it just because it's in our scriptures, and we want to try and have that idea that it has to be there without any arguments about it.
I think that's very difficult. I mean, you have to read many of the scriptures that when you believe in reincarnation, when our gurus say each one of us has been through various different life forms. I myself might have been in hell. I might have been. So it's a question of reading through the lives of the various people which has been written in the scriptures. It then makes you believe. And when you read those scriptures, they make it very logical sense. When they say that Amanas ne I affect Haiti, so something happened to him. If they now go back to 2, 3, 4 lives before, it actually makes sense that in our Bhagwan Mahavira Kanma led Paul after this many births, it came to do that. And it makes you sense that this has happened after those many life births. It makes absolute sense. He did that karma and this is what he did. So based on that, it's your then leap of faith that there must be hell. Heaven is again a very different concept. What Christians believe in heaven and what we believe in heaven. When we say heaven, heaven means Devlok. Heaven could mean Devlok or heaven could mean Sitchila. So, I want to go to heaven. What do you mean by heaven? Devlok ma jauch ke Sitchila ma jauch. So, the definition of what when people say heaven, I don't want any life and death, I don't want any suffering of life and death, I want to go to heaven, that to us is Sitchila. But many times heaven is actually constituted as Devlok. Even in the scriptures, if you read some of the translations which many of the Westerners have done, when they talk of heaven and hell, which means hell and heaven means Devlok. Okay, Sadhu Maharaj, he's died, he's now gone to Devlok. But Devlok is not the ultimate heaven for us. But then to answer your question is, how can anyone prove? That proof is purely based on scriptural faith, and sometimes it depends if you've got that self-revelation. It is described in some Meg Kumar story chain. Bhagwan Mahavir, Meg Kumar, do you remember the story of there's a fire, and then in his previous birth, the elephant kept his leg up. There was a rabbit which went underneath, he just kept his leg up for 3 days, and because his leg became very stiff, he died. In the next birth, he was born as a human, and then he wanted to take Diksha with Lord Mahavir. After the first day of Diksha, he was sleeping near the door, and door bada mansola bathroom ne bada jai Sadhu Maharaj, so they were just disturbing him, and his sleep was being disturbed. He went thinking, this is ridiculous. He was a prince before that. What is this? A day before I was like a prince, and now today people are kicking me at night, and it's such discomfort. I cannot even sleep here. And the moral of the story was, he went next day to Bhagwan Mahavir and said, I can't cope with this. Bhagwan Mahavir said, think, what were you before? Search. And in that process, Bhagwan Mahavir led him to that kind of meditation and contemplation. He himself realized, yes, I was actually an elephant in my previous birth. I could tolerate that pain for 3 days. What I can't tolerate pain for just overnight? Can't I bear it? And then he says, yes, I now remember my previous birth. And I'll keep on staying as a sadhu. So some people do have that recollection of their previous births. Now, then again, science will not believe. It's a question of faith.
But what I'm asking is about physical entities like heaven and hell, like earth.
According to Jains believe that they are physical entities, so it's a metaphysics. That heaven and hell, according to us, is metaphysics. It's a reality. It's not a figment of imagination, and that's according to belief. So if someone you can't prove it, our exact location mache, the very vivid description of hell. Hell mache, there is no sunlight. It's total darkness. There are 7 types of hell. Heavens, similarly, there are different types of heaven. There are very vivid descriptions of what heaven and hell is like, and then it's a question of then belief. Dimensions change, what kind of environment is there. It's a very vivid description of heaven and hell. So there's one thing.